Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We're talking about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm back today with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore, as well as our special guests, Daniel and Mark from Longbow Motors in the United Kingdom. Daniel, Mark, welcome to our show. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks, David. Pleasure to be here.
No, it's great. It's great to have y'all. We've taken a look and we've kind of discussed a little bit about your sports cars, a little bit. They're exciting looking. It's definitely a different look, you know. We're always really upbeat about, you know, obviously we're in the EV space. You probably don't know it. Bill is he's probably one of the most veteran people in this space there is. Our EVworld.com has been around since 1998. We're the oldest electric vehicle website. Bill and
I look it, don't I?
Yeah. We've had some people on here who drove the GM EV1 that actually were like people who leased it, you know. So we've had some people that have been in the space for a long time, but it's interesting just kind of to see, and all the things Bill's seen change in the environment. All right, so Mark, you're the sales guy, right?
Well, Daniel and I kind of wear every hat. I think it's a really important part when we're doing what is, of course, something that is grounded in a lot of logic. And we like to often say we've been in the industry for a long time, but I think 15 years doesn't sound a long time now in front of you, Bill. But it's also a real passion for us, right? I mean, doing what we're doing, as Elon, our boss from many years ago, said, right? Building a car company, an electric one, is idiocy. So there has to be an element here of passion as well from us. So we wear all the hats, David, from sales to design to engineering. We are involved in absolutely every part of this to make sure we build the best car we possibly can.
That's fantastic. I mean, they're beautiful cars, cars. And I know you're currently taking reservations for these. Or is it just one of these two models you're taking reservations, or it's both of them you're taking reservations?
Both, yeah. So reservations are open for the Speedster, as you see there, open top, and for the Roadster. So Speedster's delivered first, so deliveries begin 2026 next year, and then the Roadster deliveries will follow after that, so 2027.
Yeah, they're just awesome looking vehicles. Now, I've seen some information, and you guys chatting on LinkedIn. You know, you're calling these lightweight vehicles, and you're even comparing a little bit into the eVTOL space. Explain to me what makes these, because people always talking about, you know, how the electric vehicles, they're heavy, they're tearing up the roads. You know, this is actually a big point of controversy in the U.S. So wearing out tires, you're shredding your tires to the bone every 4,000 miles. You know, tell me what makes these so lightweight.
So first of all, David, we're very offended. Actually, they're featherweight electric vehicles, so we're much
featherweight.
Yeah, we're the first featherweight electric vehicles. Yeah, so we're a new class. So everything else is much heavier. So yeah, we are the first featherweight electric vehicle. So that's defined as being under 1,000 kilograms, which means we have over 300 horsepower per ton, which I think is a key characteristic that I think you need to have to be a successful electric sports car in the modern age. And actually, when you look at it, again, this was, you know, way down the road in your EV career, Bill, but early on in the electric vehicle revolution, so the Tesla Roadster, that weighed in and around 1,250 kilograms, 2,500 odd pounds, some bit more than that, 2,700 pounds. And if we just put our battery pack and our motor in the original Tesla Roadster, it would weigh under a ton. So actually hitting the performance and weight characteristics we want to hit are very achievable with modern battery pack technology, certainly the way we do it. And even with miniaturization, you're seeing across everything in electric vehicles. So we think it's important that the industry stops getting heavier, more complicated, because as soon as you add any weight, you add complexity. When you add complexity, you add cost, you add additional materials, which is kind of the antithesis of really when you're looking at sustainability and circularity. And you have lower watt hours per kilometer if you have less weight. So yeah, featherweight electric vehicles, it's the only way. We think the whole the whole industry will have to shift that way, right? Technology is getting lighter, material science is getting lighter. There's no reason why cars today should be heavier than cars, 10 years ago and 20 years ago, and they all are really. Let's
kind of backtrack a little bit here, if we will. Both of you, as you mentioned earlier, both of you have worked for Elon on at least a couple different models, right? Maybe give us a little bit of a background about what that experience taught you and what you brought over from that to your company now.
We actually, Bill, sat down some years ago and wrote down, it started off as 10 rules of how to run Longbow that we'd learned from Tesla, Lucid, BYD, Polestar, all these companies that we had been. That list, I think, Daniel, I don't know what number we're up to now, but it continues to grow. But the 10 core principles are things that we learned really early on. I think the main thing is the focus on that for everything that Daniel's talking about there with lightweighting, what does this actually mean for the driver? All of these things, if you just pair it back to what does the customer want rather than perhaps what does the marketing team or the engineers or the designers all want to actually contribute to what they're putting into a vehicle today rather than a driving experience. But where did it begin? My background, I was a design engineer, and my first real kind of love was Lotus Elise. Those are the first cars that I built, designed and worked on and raced. And that was the thing that really got me into the importance of lightweighting. It's hard not to constantly reference Colin Chapman, just add lightness, because it makes the car quicker everywhere. But it really is such an important thing that I think a lot of people today probably haven't experienced. I think fewer and fewer people have got to actually experience what a lightweight vehicle actually feels like to drive. So after that, then moved into building suspension components and being heavily involved in racing and what that means for performance, before realizing that actually there's a huge shift happening with EV. Bill, I was at least a decade behind you, but still saw it at that point. Joined Tesla, helped launch the Model S, so before any retail really existed. Daniel will tell his story. He handed the keys over to me pretty much from Tesla at that point. And then since then went on to also launch Lucid in Europe, then work with companies like Hyundai, BMW to help them sprinkle some of that sort of EV modern magic before then our next big challenge, which was launching EV brands such as BYD out in the Middle East. All that time, of course, in the background, we were just constantly working away on building Longbow.
By the way, two things I should point out. Number one, you worked on the Elise, and the Elise was the mule, if you will, for the original Tesla Roadster, right?
It's a good way of putting it, I think, Bill. I think the intent was that whole platform, the whole vehicle would become electrified with Tesla's proprietary drivetrain. But I think in the end, the numbers are around about 7% actually got transferred over. I think Elon was saying that it would have been better perhaps to have started from a ground up design in the end. And that's exactly what we've done as well. Right. So I think ground up design means that we can put everything in the right place from the very beginning as well.
Okay. How did you come up with Longbow? Of course, little history here. That is probably the weapon of choice of the English military through basically the Middle Ages and things until we finally got firearms and things. It was the battle, the weapon of choice that won a number of the important battles that England fought in its long history. So how did you come up? Why'd you pick that name?
Arriving at a name is really, really, really hard, first of all, right? So it needs to be a name that you can spell quite easily. It needs to be a name that isn't taken. It needs to match your brand, and it needs to really tie into what you're doing. So actually, we spent like picking the names for your kids. It's actually, that's a lot easier than picking a name for a company. We did that like overnight for our kids, but for the company, it took months. But really, it just kind of appeared to us one day, and it's really around the Longbow is a weapon, but really when you think of it as a tool, and the tool on its own is nothing. So a piece of yew with a string on it does nothing on its own, and an archer is nothing without the Longbow. It's really that symbiosis between the two. And actually, there's a lot of craftsmanship in a longbow. So crafting the U-bow, so Boyers used to craft those. And I think just a point of pride, it's very British. And we see that for us with our vehicles. It's, the vehicle on its own is nothing. The driver is nothing without the vehicle. It's that symbiosis between the two coming together. And for us, that kind of craftsmanship and grounding ourselves in the traditions of our great United Kingdom and our great Isles here is really important for us, for our brand and for our product as well.
Dave?
Oh, I'm just fascinated with all this. Now, Daniel, you also have a history with Tesla. Your story any different than Mark's?
No, exactly the same. Move on. No, we're very we crossed over. So I'm more of the nerd. So Mark's the cool one, and he rides motorcycles and races cars. And Mark used to hold the hill climb record for electric vehicles for Goodwood before it came along, and it was crushed by the IDR, I think. So Mark's the cool guy. I'm a nerd. And then I jumped out of airplanes at low altitude. And then my first real job was Tesla out in California, actually, 2010, employee 650. Then came over to Europe for the Roadster. I left just before Model S because I didn't want to work weekends. I didn't want to work in malls, which was where Tesla was heading.
Yeah.
Then other Silicon Valley businesses, worked in Uber for a bit, launching that. So really in startups. And then came back to Tesla as employee 33,000. So I was employee 650 and then employee 33,000. And that was for Model 3. And I think Model 3 is probably the most important electric vehicle that has ever been built in that segment, because it really, and we've done a bunch of work around this, is it transformed that segment. So that whole accelerate the transition to electric vehicles, Model 3 did that for one of the largest segments. Then, which is part of the reason which inspires us to do the same for the sports car segment. And then I was the first employee at Lucid Motors outside of North America. So that was launching the EMEA business. So start off the Saudi business and then the European business through to launch, growing that out. And that's where Mark and I actually re-engaged. So I kind of handed over the keys to him when I left. And then we teamed up when I came back to Tesla. And then we worked together at Lucid launching that. And then same thing, Mark and I then were kind of, let's say, guns for hire to go and help other brands launch. So we've launched 6 brands. Is that right, Mark? So a couple of Americans and then a couple of Chinese brands and some others, multiple continents, multiple markets. And then kind of in the background, we've, really the last 4 years in one way or another, we've been working on Longbow as a project or as a program. And then really in earnest, the last 18 months, 2 years is when we've been working to kind of launch the car and the company.
Right.
So
So why most people, well, Elon, for example, well, not Elon, Mark and Martin started off with the Elise, right? One model, electrify it and so on. Why the 2 models, and especially why the open cockpit one, which is, I was reading through an article about what you guys are doing. It was pointing out that you can't sell that open cockpit one here in the United States, apparently for whatever, highway safety regulations or rules and so on. So why 2 cars and why an open cockpit?
Yeah, I mean, there are rules that allow us to sell the car in North America. So the Speedster we will have deliveries in North America on the Speedster. But it's really around planting a flag. So as a brand, your first product can define you, and it can define your design direction. It can define your intent. And the halo product of any sports car company is a Speedster. So if that's the Ferrari Monza SP2, if it's the McLaren Elva, even Pininfarina now have the N95. So which is a Battista derivative. And normally they're built 150 units and they cost like $2 million. So the coolest cars and the best cars any brand makes is a Speedster. So we thought we'll do that, but we'll shave a couple of zeros off the price so that actually real humans can use it and they're not worried and keep it in kind of a hermetically sealed vault so it never loses value. So I think that's the main reason. And I think the other one is it is frankly, it is easier to build a Speedster. in the first instance, and that allows us to bring a really great product to market without any compromises sooner. And then everything we learned and built in the Speedster carries over into the Roadster. So the Roadster is really, it's a Speedster with a roof. I mean, there's more to it than that, but really we're adding a roof and all of the refinements you'll need in a Roadster on that vehicle. So when we looked at it, really, it was the natural choice. And honestly, it's the coolest car we can build. So we thought we'd just build that first.
Yeah.
Same chassis, same assembly line?
It'll be different assembly line because it's Speedster's limited volume, so 150 units, and Roadster will be series production at nudging up again 4,000 units a year. So it'll be a similar production for certain parts of it, but and the same chassis, but the production methods will vary as we kind of scale production.
It's very, very boutique manufacturing for the car space.
Very, very pragmatic, I think, Dave, the way we look at it. Bill, you asked us at the beginning of what things have we learned, and we can be probably quite specific on some points, but you're not a car company until you've built a car. And you guys, I'm sure, have reported on too many EV startups that show beautiful pictures of something that never turn out to be anything.
Right.
And we actually, we didn't really want, that's why Daniel was saying, 4 or 5 years we've been working on it. We didn't want to show anything until we actually started pretty much delivering cars. Pretty much the Apple model, right? Show it in September and it's already shipped in stores, ready to go. Because we really are building this car. And I think you've mentioned there, Mark and Martin, of course, from real founders of Tesla. And we have fortunate enough to speak with one of those gentlemen, and they were talking about how they would have wanted to have actually started Tesla, which is taking a lot of product components, knowledge from the market to build that car. Hence why they work with Lotus. The problem was back then, of course, much of that didn't exist. Fast forward 20 years now, nearly from when they were looking at it, the industry has moved on so far now. So we are very much able to be pragmatic in our production and how we bring the car together. And that's how we have our motto, moving at the speed of lightness. And it's because of that industry, because of that knowledge, because of the people that we've met over the last decade plus, that we can actually bring this together and build this car. So pragmatism is definitely on our list there.
So you've got more than just some really beautiful illustrations in 3D. Now you've got some real hardware that you're working on at this point.
Oh yes, yeah. So we had a mule. We haven't shown anyone our mule. So we have a absolute weapon of a mule. So it weighs 400 kilograms with 70 horsepower. And it's just a skateboard with a seatbelt and it's a weapon. It's a weapon. But even then, the module.
We should say mule, tech demonstrator, in case anyone's listening thinks we've now just got a small donkey or something.
Industry speak here. Yeah, right.
We have a burrito. That's another way of describing it. So we have a weapon of a mule, and we will have that on the road in September this year.
By the way, we're working on a campaign to popularize the word tuber to describe Tesla Robotaxi. So feel free to use that. I think it's more descriptive than Tesla Robotaxi, because with the T that is Tesla, and when you say tuber, you're thinking a potato, so you expect a Model Y to come by and pick you up. Okay.
As long as it's not a rub oven, I think we're okay, right?
So
we're not building a rub oven. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the production. I mean, is this being done in Coventry, or where it's being done over with Magna over in Austria? I mean, what are you guys doing? What's the arrangements there, or what can you talk about?
I mean, we're a British car company, so the car is designed, engineered, and manufactured in the United Kingdom. The vast majority of our supply chain comes from the United Kingdom.
Great.
So we're not a kind of hot dog pulling together components from as far as you can go. So is important for us because actually a lot of the best technology, 90% of a car is not an EV powertrain, right? It's the same stuff in every car. Your wheels, your suspension components, your even chassis components are the same. So, and when you look at lightweight sports cars, the UK is probably the best place in the world from a supply chain and from an engineering perspective. All of pretty much every Formula One team, apart from Ferrari's, in the United Kingdom. You look at the supply chain, even for most of the Italian manufacturers, comes from the United Kingdom. So the best place in the world to build a lightweight electric sports car is United Kingdom. And so we will always be a British car company. We will always design, engineer, and manufacture in the UK. So specifically where, we can't share that yet because we'll be we've got some really good content we'll be releasing around that as we get closer to it. But we're very excited that is in the United Kingdom, and that's always going to be very important for us.
So from the supply chain as well, the UK seems to have been not necessarily forgotten, but there is a reason why the majority of Formula One, Formula E, LMP teams they are based in the UK, because there's a huge amount of talent in the UK that we tap into. And the way that we have built Longbow, we often refer to it as a film studio almost, because we don't believe that what you should do is bring lots of new people together and then spend many years trying to get them to all work in harmony to produce something. Instead, we work like a film studio where we are the directors, the producers, we own everything, but we bring in the best people from the industry. And that means that we can bring in a design team. And in fact, it was led by a father and son. And again, we're going to release some more content around this. But their whole team, the way they operated meant that the car that you see behind you, behind Daniel rather, they were able to create that in a time period that I don't think any other manufacturer could consider. We're also going to be talking about our board very shortly, who is on our advisory board, all of which read as a who's who of the best sports car companies in history, in fact. And they are super surprised about how we're able to do things. And that's why they've joined us, because I think we are doing something quite different here. We are quite happy to have some of the internet tell us that it will never happen, because that kind of drives us further, and we know in the background that it very much is. So actually, what are your thoughts, gentlemen, when you first saw the car and the company? What went through your minds?
Oh, I mean, they're beautiful. I mean, they're beautiful designs. There's no question about that. I guess, my question is always getting the actual product to market. Okay, like you guys have been talking about, and you guys have been through this with some other companies. You've seen how other companies have managed to get their ideas manufactured, actually come to market. I mean, Bill and I have watched lots of companies like Canoe and others just disappoint us. Yeah, just kind of come and just, they ran out of runway too soon, and that's always a challenge. We're constantly hoping something good will happen to Aptera, and they have tons of orders yet. There's nothing out there, and so I guess that's always one of my concerns when I look at anything in this space, is what will we actually see out in the market. But one of my questions I've got for you is, so your vehicle is less than a ton in weight. What kind of, you were mentioning good kilowatts per, good kilometers per kilowatt hour. What do you expect that to actually work out to be practically?
I mean, so fundamentally, again, coming back to lightness, we can. I'm happy on those other points you raised. If you got questions on it, happy to take it. Like, we don't feel you need to pull any punches. So we fully agree with you, right? So as Mark said, putting a car on the road and producing that car in series and making money from cars is what we should be doing. That's the function of a car company, right? And a lot of the people you mentioned there, that actually didn't seem to be the function of that company. There were other functions around it, right? But fundamentally, if you're looking to get cars on the road, and those cars are profitable at a unit level and at a program level, and they are desirable, the rest kind of takes care of itself, right? Actually, Building a car is not difficult. You pull together enough engineers and you put money on it, a car pops out the other end. Creating demand for a car, consistent demand, and making money with a car is the thing that a lot of people don't manage. That's actually what you have to start with, because the other bit you can solve for, right? I mean, if I said I'm building that with an internal combustion engine, we'll say, yeah, of course you are. Right? And actually, it's in some ways it's easier to build an EV than an ICE. But anyway, we can cover that off. On the watt hours per kilometer, it's simple physics, right? If there's a 50 kilowatt hour battery pack and the car weighs 2 tons, in general, it will do half the distance of a car that weighs a ton with a 50 kilowatt hour battery pack. It's not fully linear, because once you get to speed, it's more around, coefficients of drag. But generally, especially as you said there, David, real world driving, which is accelerating, decelerating, going up hills, these kind of things, weight has a much more significant impact. And actually your delta between your WLTP or your EPA figure and your real world figure comes closer together the lighter your car is, because you can tweak your real world figure because you put highway kilometers into it, and you're as efficient as like a dove in a 3-ton car when you're on a highway at 70, but it's when you're driving around town that you lose it. So fundamentally, by making the car lighter, you narrow that gap between real world distance and WLTP EPA distance. So WLTP, we're aiming north of 260 miles, and WLTP is generally more stringent or more punitive than EPA. So take with that as you will. We're expecting real world driving. So you're going out and you're enjoying, sorry, I'm going to make a UK reference, but a spirited drive through the Cotswolds. I'm sure there'll be some equivalent in North America.
Been there, done that.
Oh, so your WLTP is expressed in miles, not in kilometers.
Yeah. UK uses WLTP as well. So WLTP standard is European standard as well, including the UK. So WLTP would be 260 miles, and real world, I'd reckon 220 without any problems. And
what is that? A 50 kilowatt battery pack, or smaller than that?
Around that, yeah, around that.
Okay, so you're well over 5 miles per kilowatt hour. So that would make you more efficient than even Lucid, because Lucid's right now kind of the leader in that space. So I think that's an important point.
But again, this is why you add lightness. This is why lightness is important. Yes. You get there without all of the trickery and all of the work that needs to be done on your frontal surface area, coefficients of drag, your efficiency in the powertrain. When you add those things in as well, which are very expensive to work on as a manufacturer, you can squeeze even more out of it. But you can get a better result with less weight than you can with more weight and more cost and all those other things that increase the cost of your car program. So fundamentally, just adding lightness really, really helps you in so many different ways.
So of course, part of the issue with lightness is you get into the question of crash safety, because if it's big and it's bulky and it's heavy, that's a tank, and that's going to be much more safe for the person inside the vehicle, not necessarily the other drivers on the road, but it's going to be safer. So how are you guys addressing the crash safety using much lighter materials?
First principles, right? So our car has 40% of the stopping distance of a 2-ton car. So
wow,
we don't crash because we stop before the crash happens, right? So you're 40% of the distance, and I think it's even more when you get into like wet scenarios. So 40% of the distance. And when you think of braking, crash time is thinking time plus braking time. When you've got 40% of the distance, having a bit more thinking time helps you stop not crashing in the first place. So fundamentally, that is the safest thing you can do. All the other general safety points, again, look, if you compare it to a 3-ton, SUV, electric SUV with all of the whiz bangs around it, fine, but that's not the comparison, right? We're comparing it to an ICE, and an ICE still has a giant metal thing in front that's trying to make its way into your cabin where your legs are,
right?
Which we don't have because it's an electric vehicle, right? Your crumple zones front and rear are the same as any EV, and then obviously the torsional rigidity with the battery pack and the chassis really help with kind of sidebar impact. So you have all the benefits of an EV as a sports car, And with the added benefit of the lighter weight means your stopping distance is shorter than an equivalent sports car.
Right.
I don't think it's fair to compare it to a Lucid Gravity, for example, which is a very different vehicle class and a very, very different type of vehicle.
Right.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, if you look at a couple things, so Tesla, for instance, is if you're in an accident, it's a very safe vehicle to be in an accident in. But on the flip side, they do get in a lot of accidents, but it's mostly because people get lead foot. The car is so fast, it gets away from people and, they get in accidents. It's not necessarily that the features of the car aren't inherently safe. It's just, but the car itself, I've known people who've been into some accidents they shouldn't have been able to have walked away from, and they were perfectly fine after the accident. And we've actually featured some things where, there was that lady in China who took a Model Y that went spinning through the air and landed on its wheels. And everybody got it. There was 4 people in the Model Y. They all got out and walked away. But it's interesting to see that EVs seem to be inherently safer, even though, like your cars are rocket ships on the road, very, very, very fast automobiles. I was telling Bill about somebody taking me for a test drive or a test ride in a 1,000 horsepower EV last week. And, just how quick, that thing was. It's like, but we didn't get in an accident. So thankfully we didn't have to test to see how it was going to work out in a 0 to 100 ride we did.
You asked earlier. Yeah, you asked earlier what my impressions of the car were, and I thought absolutely gorgeous. I do have a bias though, because I actually lived in Britain for a couple of years, and my very first sports car was an MG Midget. So I have kind of a love affair, with English sports cars. And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't one of the early engineers, I've interviewed him, I can't think of his name right now, that was part of the original Tesla design team. Did he not start, I think, was it an Ariel that he had as an electric vehicle? And that was sort of one of their early test, for want of a better term, test mules. What was his name now? I lived out in California. But anyway, he had that experience of a very lightweight, basically like you say, a go-kart with electric motor on it. Do you remember who I'm talking about? I can't think of his name right now.
It might come to one of us, but I think, Bill, you've touched upon a personal thing there, because my dad was moving on to, I believe, his 2nd or 3rd MG Midget just before I was born, and then he had to get rid of his MG Midget that he loved so much because I was born in 2 seats. So I feel like I almost owe him one of these cars now, so it's come full circle.
Yeah.
I've owned many Coopers, and I was impressed by the lightweight car, how ridiculously fast it corners. And I'm sure these have an impressive cornering abilities as well, just with that kind of lightness.
It's a driving experience. Like, linking it back to what we were talking about with safety as well, is I think with a lot of EVs, some of the problem comes because of all of the distractions that you have within the cabin, big screens, all the technology, all the features, and also the feeling that you're not really connected to the motion or to what's happening. You're kind of just sat in this lovely isolated cocoon, and that's great, right? I mean, there are very few other cars I would love to be in than a full electric sedan or something for getting from place A to place B. It's the best place you could sit. But when you are kind of you're distracted or detracted from what's happening and distracted, then that driving experience is also lost. So look, our car isn't going to have massaging seats. It's not going to be like a Yangwang U8 that can travel across the Yangtze and sail into water. It's not going to have all of those features. It is going to be a really connected driving experience. And we always talk about theatre. So David, talking about that connected drive, yes, you're already going to be connected, right? It's going to be a super lightweight sports car. You'll be low to the ground. You'll be feeling things you probably wouldn't in a Tesla Model S, for example. But We also then want to add something extra. We think that there needs to be theatre in driving now as well. So how we're going to do that is something that we're going to be hopefully releasing over the next few months or so, that's going to add something more than just being a thrilling lightweight sports car.
Yeah, the one of the people commenting in the chat here session was asking, maybe we might want to talk about what you're seeing as the price of your vehicles.
You mean cost to the customer or cost to us as a manufacturer?
Well, no. What's your MSRP on the car going to be?
Yeah, UK £85,000 for the Speedster is starting price, and for the Roadster, the starting price is £65,000. That includes VAT, so value-added tax, which you guys get to dodge in North America.
Yeah.
So take the lovely, beautiful tariffs that are in place. Add a bit of import cost on top of what the UK price ex VAT is, and you arrive in the right ballpark of what the North America price would be, which is pretty much the same point.
So, Mark, you have experience at Goodwood. When do we get to see the car at Goodwood?
Well, I've got that record to take back, haven't I, Bill? That Daniel mentioned.
Yes.
So, I don't want to impact our negotiations with Goodwood. It's a very expensive event to attend, so I will leave that one open for now. But we would love to be at Goodwood. We'll actually be there. Daniel and I will be walking around. I think it's a couple of weeks. That we'll be there. So anyone sees us, do say hello.
Nice.
So
nice.
when are you short? Most of the time, you always have a big debut, right? The sheets are pulled off of it, or the curtain is raised, or whatever. When are you estimate at this point that happening? The official debut.
We will always do things a little bit differently because we're not a large OEM, and we will never be a large OEM. We're a motor car company. So we will have this car, as you see behind us, on the road in September. How we choose to share that with our existing customers, with friends, family, the press, I think we'll keep that a closely guarded secret. But watch out for late September, early October, because we'll be showing the car. The car will be on the road, and we're not going to take it to the top of a big hill and push it down, hoping that people don't notice that. It will be a real car. It will do real miles. 0 to 60 will be not production, but will be under 6. I think miles, we're looking at north of 100-mile range already, even on our first prototype vehicle. So yeah, it's a real car on the road, and we're very excited to share it and drive it, to be honest.
Yeah, please don't adopt the Nikola model. That's certainly not optimized.
That is actually where weight helps you, though, to be fair. If you're pushing, that's where your weight helps you overcome the forces of gravity and air friction. So that's the only situation I concede where weight is better.
Where weight makes a difference, yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
How's your weight distribution? I mean, is this going to be 4-wheel? Is it going to be front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive? You're going to have the battery in the bed between the wheels? What's the architecture going to be?
One of our core principles, and I'll let Mark answer proper car questions, is simplify the design, engineering, manufacturing process, but not compromising. So the simplest and most elegant solution for a sports car is always rear-wheel drive, single motor. Okay. So that is the right solution always for a sports car. When you're adding extra motors, you're trying to get more power. When you add more power, you add more weight. That's kind of the antithesis of where we are. Right. So really the core vehicle, and certainly the Speedster, will always be primarily offered as a rear wheel vehicle for that kind of engaging driving experience.
Our mission is to change how the earth feels about sports cars. It's quite grandiose, but if we break it down to some of the important parts there for drivers in that, we think the world has more than enough $2, $3, $4, $5 million plus electric hypercars out there. That really doesn't change how people think about electric sports cars. There isn't really something out there that more people can afford and enjoy and drive. And even if you can, drive around in a $4 million hypercar, you're probably not enjoying it a great deal because you're scared about sticking it into a tree or a ditch or anything else. And they're so big
kidding.
and they're wide, and they're so good, right? Those cars are phenomenal on road and on track. So you have to really push those things to kind of get any feel back from the car. So when you're talking about weight distribution, that's a really important one for us, but perhaps more so is not sticking outrageous amounts of power into the vehicle, but actually playing with the sensible things like wheel size, for example, that allow you to have lower weight, lower power, but still to be able to actually have dynamic fun with the car. And that's kind of the direction that we have, again, playing back into that theatre piece. And that's why we don't need a 2,000 horsepower vehicle to have fun in. We can reduce that power and weight a great deal and hopefully give you even more fun because you're not so worried about what's happening with the car underneath you.
So what are you looking at for estimated horsepower?
We're around sort of 240 kilowatts or so.
Okay.
But we have a lot of potential there to play around with what's happening with additional motors, different types of motors. So we're keeping things under wraps, but what we say is around 240, 250 kilowatts is more than enough to propel this car to those kinds of figures.
When you're showing 0 to 60 in 3.6, you know, that's pretty fast, you know, or, you know, on the Speedster 3.5, I mean, it's a pretty quick car, you know, especially for the price point. And, you know, I don't know, they're beautiful cars. That's all I can really say.
What's the marketing plan here, as far as that just you're going to pick it up at the factory? You're going to have dealerships. You know, when do you see exports outside of the UK? That type of thing.
Look, the North American market, we have spent quite a bit of time in the kind of automotive industry. And what you should do is look at where your customers are, look at what your customers are buying, and then build them the product that no one else is building, right? For Europe and for sports cars, there are around 250,000 a year sold, and none of them are electric currently. So two-seater sports cars, you can't buy one. The only one you can buy is the MG Cyberster. So anything under $200,000, the only sports car in the market you can buy is the MG Cyberster globally. Which we're going to go and find those 200,000 customers per year. And if they've been waiting 5 years, there's 1 million of them that are looking for a nice sports car. And a lot of them are in North America, and then they're in Europe, and then they're in Japan. Really, that's your kind of core two-seater sports car markets, really.
Okay.
So again, Mark said, right, change how the earth feels about sports cars. Can't just be, as much as we like to just drive around the Cotswolds with our cars, we'll probably take them everywhere in the world and enjoy all the other roads that the world has to offer. So yes, we will be distributing globally. For us, you have to own the customer. The OEM or the car company is responsible for the customer experience, full stop. So even if you are working with partners, even if you're working with agents, ambassadors, people who at the end may be delivering the vehicle, or they may be supporting you with elements of it, as a car company, we're always accountable for the customer. So the customer will always be engaging through us, through our systems. We'll always make sure that we're driving a consistent and an elevated customer experience across the board. And from a servicing perspective, you know, we will have a radically different way of approaching that, which means that from the very beginning, we're able to have a very large service network without us putting significant capital into a large service network. So stay tuned and we'll share a bit more on that. But we saw that as a significant decelerator for other companies we work for. Because, you know, if you want to build a service location, it's $4 million, right? If you want to build 10, that's $40 million. $40 million is a lot of money. You can have a couple of car programs for $40 million. And $40 million, frankly, only gets you 10 locations, which maybe covers the eastern seaboard in the United States, right? So, you know, we never wanted our ability to raise capital, and it also takes 18 months from when you start looking for a service location to opening it. So, and that can really slow down your growth and the ability for people to enjoy your car, and slow down how we're changing how the earth feels about sports cars. So for us, it's actually everyone thinks about sales, but service is actually the greatest sales enabler, right? You have a sales location in where are you gentlemen based?
We're both in Nebraska, the middle of the U.S.
Yeah.
You've heard of Warren Buffett?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's my neighbor. No, not really, but he's the same town. So,
yeah.
So if we opened a service location in the fifth of the 5 largest or 10 largest markets in the US, they probably wouldn't be within 2,000 miles of either of you gentlemen, right? And that would stop you buying a car. But if we opened a service location next door, but your sales location was in California, you'd probably still buy a car. So service is actually a much more important sales enabler than sales is, because that's your first question is, how much does it cost? Where can I get the thing serviced? So we'll spend a lot of time on that and really changing that model, because I think a lot of car companies now, not your Teslas or Lucids or Rivians, but traditional car manufacturers are really struggling with the dealership model, because 50% of your revenues come from after sales, and they won't come from after sales with electric vehicles unless you're charging more, and you shouldn't be charging more because the car needs less servicing. So you have to break that and find a new model that works, that maybe isn't fully direct to consumer and isn't the traditional dealership model. And we're excited what we've put together there.
Okay.
So
Joel, let me.
Joel's had a couple questions. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, first one is Warren drives a Cadillac, or is driven in a Cadillac. Generally, that's the car that he goes with. But yeah, Joel did point out here about the fact that Ferrari, of course, which is one of the better known sports car manufacturers, had said, well, we're not going to get into EVs as early as we thought we were. We're going to kind of push it back. Does this sort of change in temperament with the change of government here, and just a general tenor of the current world economy and things, how is that going to impact what your projections are in terms of when you roll out? Do you think you've got a viable enough product here that I don't care what Ferrari does, we can make ours work?
I really hope everyone pushes their electric vehicle programs back even further, right?
Okay.
Give us more runway to go and conquest their customers, because customers want it, people want it. And if we put a car on the road that is better, great. Like, people will come and look, we don't need to sell 100,000 cars a year. We sell 10,000 cars a year. We're one of the largest sports car manufacturers, and we're $1 billion in revenue, right? Like, we want everyone, as much as it hurts me because it effectively is polluting our skies and using raw materials and continues the cycle of carbonization. For us as a brand, it's great. Keep doing it. We'll build great cars. By the time you enter the space, we'll have loads of loyal customers and a global distribution network, and much more of these fine chats with gentlemen like you to convince people to come and drive our cars. So go for it.
And before Tesla did what they did, nobody wanted an electric sedan either. So I would say this directly to Ferrari. I think there is a real lack of foresight. If they were to build a compelling electric sports car, they would have customers for them, I am sure. In the same way that Tesla built compelling electric cars when people said nobody wants one. And look what's happened there. So again, it comes back to our mission, change how the earth feels about sports cars, because at the moment, nobody believes that an electric sports car can be fun. It doesn't have the noise. It doesn't have X, Y, Z. That's what we are here to change. So we are probably going to be, or we hope to be, the catalyst for that change. So Ferrari can come and knock on our door, and we'll tell them all about it in a few years' time.
Well, if you look at the Porsche Taycan or Taycan, or however you pronounce it, they initially put that out with only about a 200-mile range. And I think that was one of the problems they ran into with the vehicle, that it wasn't as well received. And now they've gone back to the drawing board, and I think the newer ones are right at 300 miles now. And so they went back and they figured out what they did wrong on the early ones, and they've come back and corrected that. And I see you guys are right there at that, pretty close to that 300-mile range point as well, which seems to be kind of a magic number that people look for in electric cars now. And I think you're in a good spot with your range and all that. Obviously, people have bought lots of the Porsche ones, and I think that I know Ferrari's been talking about an electric SUV. I didn't know if they were actually looking at a electric sports car. I do know when you go over to Lamborghini, they have something that looks kind of like a crossover they've been working on, and they also have been making the prepping versions of the Urus as a plug-in hybrid. So they've been, changing some things they're doing in that space.
Go look at Maserati, right? Maserati have the Folgore. That's the same Ferrari property. What I'd imagine is the same thing as as Lamborghini will likely be doing with the new Macan EV and Lamborghiniizing that. My expectation would be that the Elettrica, or whatever the Ferrari, I think that's the name of the Ferrari SUV, will likely be a derivative of the Maserati Folgore. That would be my expectation.
Okay, so Maserati's already got an EV in Europe.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's what I'd expect. So it's kind of a not a shooting brake SUV, kind of a crossover. It's a beautiful car. Ferrari would be a beautiful car as well. But yeah, Mark said, right, that sports car space. Other manufacturers are looking at it, but it's the and one of our advisors say this is that if you've got a platform that's built for an SUV and a sedan, how do you convert that into a lightweight sports car? You can't. So you have to build from scratch. And where every OEM is leveraging platform technologies, and your volumes are maybe too slow to do that, or too small, right? If you're building 20,000 a year, that might not be worth it. For us, 20,000 a year is crazy, right? As a car company, I think everyone looks at Tesla and thinks you have to build 2 million a year. We build 10,000 cars a year, which is what we're aiming for 2030. That's an incredible, forget aiming for the stars, right? We're going through black holes into multiverses if we're doing 10,000 cars a year. And people think that as niche, that's small.
Yeah.
But it's so much, it's so many cars.
It's still more than Lucid.
Achievable. Yeah.
It's still more than Lucid's done the last few years.
Yeah.
So now Joel's asking about cost of charging on the road. Now, Joel, I know you're in the UK, and I think in the UK, a lot of your charging networks decided they needed to actually make money. And so in order for them to actually stay afloat and stay in business, they're charging an arm and a leg over there. I suspect as you see more widespread competition and these EV companies or these EV charging companies are getting competition and they are staying afloat, you'll start seeing that even out a little bit.
I would like to call that the airport restaurant effect, right? Most people charge their cars at home, right? So, and that's whatever your sort of local rate is, whether it's in pence or whether it's in pennies over here. When you take a trip, you can always expect to pay more. And this is hot. Step into an airport, go to the coffee shop, go to the eatery there, and you're going to pay what might cost you out on the street and at home or whatever, a couple bucks will run you $10, $20, right? There's just, anytime you go any distance, you can expect to pay a premium. That's my view. So I would expect if you're going to drive from London to Edinburgh, right, or Coventry or Birmingham or whatever, and you're going to have to charge your car, you're just simply going to pay more. That's the premium of travel. That's the way I look at it, at least.
It's, you're going to be charging off peak, to be really specific. So UK, you'll be charging off peak. So you're paying the lowest pence per kilowatt hour you can most of the time with the vehicle. And right, if you're doing 20,000 miles a year, you might be doing 2,000 using third-party chargers, right? And maybe you're paying slightly more there. I'd even challenge that. I think even with third-party charge, even in the UK, it's still cheaper than traveling with petrol or gas over the same distance. So, but certainly blended, you're a fraction of what you pay in. I think we did a calculation the other day, and it's £4,600 a year savings from a cost of ownership perspective versus a 911, right? And that's a blend of fuel savings and maintenance savings. So if you're keeping the car for 5 years, it's £20,000 cheaper just in operating costs,
right.
Which people don't really think about. But your kind of TCO advantage, and we didn't think about because it's not cool or sexy, right? But your TCO advantage on the car is significant because again, we're not replacing like 1.8 liter kind of Priuses. We're replacing sports cars, and sports cars they drink a lot, right? So
right.
we're actually our cost, but we still have the same pence per mile advantage as you called out, David. Our watt hours per kilometer is very low, so we have the same pence per mile advantage of like a Model 3, but we're not comparing ourselves to like a Mondeo. We're comparing ourselves to like a 911, right, or an Aston Martin Vantage or something. So those total cost of ownership, those mileage savings really add up very quickly.
And there was a question on, obviously to go into manufacturing, you've gotten somewhere along the line, you've gotten some significant financial backing. Is it a sovereign wealth fund? What kind of backing have you guys ended up getting for this project?
We managed to accrue shares at Tesla and Lucid together, and we're not off enjoying our retirement. We're here investing that in this program. My wife would probably prefer that we're off enjoying retirement, but she tolerates me. But no, that, and then we've got a really incredible group of investors around us. So some professional capital, some private angels, enthusiasts. So yeah, we're well funded, and we've got a really good cohort, and we've also chosen to.
What Dave is trying to get to is, given your experience with Lucid and the Saudis, he's probably wondering, is there any kind of Saudi sovereign wealth fund involved in this?
We're more than happy for them to give us $1 billion. So if they see this podcast and decide that they want to give us $1 billion as well, no, look, no, that's not the funding path we're looking at.
Okay.
Right. So we see a really, we're building a really strong business. We've got really good unit level margins. We've got a really good tight operating plan, really good tight program for the vehicles. Okay. So we've got a really solid plan and great investors who understand that and are there to support us along the way. So
yeah, Daniel, Mark, we've actually ran a little longer than I had expected today, and I just want to thank you guys for coming on the show today. Folks, I want to thank people for watching, and I'll be back tomorrow with our engineer Mike Herzog. Guys, if you want to hang out for just a minute, I'm going to go ahead and end the episode.